Okay, so this is my full turbo kit I'm speccing for my b18 C4. 90% of this is off of eBay. So here you can see I've got the cast log manifold with the T3 flange on it, £40 delivered to my front door with gaskets, studs, nuts, bolts, etc. Actually, a lot better than I expected it to be. I was expecting it to have really rough casting marks, but it all looks really good quality. And then a max speeding rods turbo with line kit, which was part of the deal but come in a separate package itself. Again, all looks good. Everything was there, wasn't missing anything, which was brilliant. Obviously, you need to clock it for your fitment on your car, but we'll deal with that later. Has a 2.5-inch V-band exhaust on it, so easy to get a downpipe for that as well. And then you can see all the little bits and bobs there. Perfect. And then the line kit, AN lines, all the right fittings. So you need to bolt it onto the engine, and then you need to put it so the oil drain is pointing straight down and the oil feed is pointing up. You can see this is the wrong way around right now. So you just loosen the bolts on the left of the turbo and then spin it round. Super easy, super simple. And then the same thing on the actual turbine housing itself. Once you've done that, you can move on to doing your oil feed. So you see there, you've got to remove the oil pressure sensor off the back of the block. That's a 24mm socket you're going to need there. Once you've removed that, you can put on the brass T-piece or cross piece, whatever you want to call it, which has got a bung and then obviously a spare hole for this pressure sensor and then another hole for the line that goes to the turbo. The initial setup, the way I did it, where I put it in right there, I had to end up taking it apart and putting it in because the oil filter was in the way slightly, but you get the gist of it. There's 4 holes there for each of the bits. And then screwing the line into it after is a bit trickier. You want it pointing in a nice free direction so you can spin the line, because the end of the line is hard, so you've got to twist it all together to get it to thread in. If you try and force it, you're just going to ruin the line, unfortunately. And then again, max speeding rods, intercooler kit, so same as the turbo. This was £155 delivered, and this is a 2.5-inch kit. Quite an interesting kit. I've not seen a directional intercooler before. You can see it's got a shape on one side to funnel the air in, and on the back it's just how most intercoolers traditionally look. So I don't know if this is a new design. I'm not used to working with new cars. I don't know if new intercoolers are like that. And we'll be fitting that later on in this video. There's a few more things we need to do first. So moving on to the turbo drain here, I just offered it up to get the correct length that I needed, wrapped tape around it where I was going to cut, and then use the hacksaw in the vise to chop it to length. The reason I use the tape is to prevent all the little metal bits around it fraying, which will make the next step really difficult if you don't do that. So then you've got the little AN fittings that come with the kit. So you're just gonna unscrew this part of it off here. That's the bit that the pipe is gonna go into initially. So the bit that's in my left hand there, we're gonna need first. And you can see here, if you just try to put it in, it's way too thick. The metal bit around it is just going to fray off and it's going to be too difficult. So what you're going to do is you're going to get a hose clamp. You're going to put that around it. You can see the tape is still on it there, preventing it all fraying off. And you're going to tighten it in so it squeezes the hose. Now, it's not going to be perfectly round, but that's fine. It's brought it in a little bit. Now, I'm going to do this in the vise, but you can see how you're able to angle it in a little bit better now. You can get one part of the pipe in, and then you're going to use a screwdriver to push in the edge of the pipe, all the little metal bits and stuff like that, so it doesn't fray out around it. Once you've got each edge in the whole way round, then you can remove the clamp and push it into the fitting itself. And you need to push it all the way down, so when it's turned around, you can see rubber at the entrance, so it's got the full depth. So you can see here, now I've removed the clamp, I'm just pushing it into the fitting as far as it will go. You can use a little bit of WD or silicone spray, ideally silicone spray, because WD is not great for rubber. Now you can see here the rubber is all the way at the end of the fitting, which is what you want. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bit of tape around it, so when I'm putting the other part of the fitting on, I can make sure that the pipe isn't being pushed out of the fitting. It's basically, I'm just using it as a marker, because when you try and put the other bit of the fitting on, if you're pressing too hard, or it's not supported from the back, the pipe can push out the back of the fitting. Now I'm heating it up to soften the rubber so I can push the fitting into it. Again, use a bit of silicone spray. I'm using WD because I haven't got any. I know it's not ideal. And now it's soft enough for me to push the fitting in, and now the rubber is going to move back a little bit, and as I tighten this in, it's going to expand into the fitting that I'm screwing into, which clamps it in place. And because of that tape that's on the back, I can see and make sure I'm not just pushing it out the back, because then you've not got a proper fitting. Then it's simple as that. You just got to put it onto the turbo and onto the drain fitting on the sump. I actually ended up using 2 straight fittings. You can see it's a straight and a 45 here, but I changed it out just because it worked better with where I'd already placed the turbo drain and the sump. I'm sure you could make it so you could use a 45 and a straight, which is what the kit came with. Next, I ordered a wastegate off eBay. This was £47 delivered. Came with an 8 PSI spring, but realistically, an eBay wastegate, is that 8 PSI spring going to be accurate? Probably not. So good thing is with 8 PSI spring, it means I can run a little manual boost controller to maybe bring that up a little bit, because it's probably going to be a little bit low. Now at this point, there's nothing else I can do until I actually fit this b18 in the car. So obviously whip the D14 out. So a few bits I kept off the D14. I needed to keep the loom because I need to use that on the b18. I'll do a full separate video of how to use a D14 loom on a B series, because it's quite a big process. And obviously, I kept a few other bits to sell on eBay and stuff like that to get some money back in the project, and just binned all the auto stuff. You can see here where I'm splitting the loom to like make the injector plugs reach and all that sort of stuff. But again, like I said, I'll do that in a separate video because it's quite complicated. I just want to focus on the boosting bits here today. Same way I've always done it. Slide the engine in underneath with the car jacked up nice and high, and then drop the car over it, and then just mounted it up, and then we was ready to get on with the intercooler pipe work and all that sort of stuff. And then last thing before I installed the intercooler was bolting on that wastegate. Obviously eBay wastegate didn't fit, the bolts wouldn't go on the studs because the casting is too thick, so I just filed that down a bit. And then it was onto the intercooler. So with the intercooler, I had a choice to make. I could either run it to the left, which is what I've done previously on a D14 turbo, and I did that just because it fitted the bits of pipe work that I had. And then with this universal kit, when I offered it up, that was going to be a good option as well. But it just looked so bad. And I just wasn't happy with, this is going on YouTube as well. I wasn't happy with just doing it like that and having it sit into the left. So I decided to mount it centrally, and then using the pipe work I've got, I can do something a little bit different. Even if I was going to run it to the left, I was going to have to chop down this little U-bend coupler here, and then probably have to have an end welded onto it again so it will seal up properly. So regardless, some work was going to have to be done. So I thought, let's just mount it centrally, and what needs welding needs welding. I'm going to have to do it regardless. So I went against this option. And now you can see if it mounted centrally, the U-bends at each end weren't going to reach. But luckily, obviously, the kit come with loads of spare pipe work. So I'm just marking up here where it needs to be cut, what needs to be added on. I'm just marking 1 and 1, 2 and 2, 3 and 3, so the welder knows what bits are going where. And then when I took it down to him, it was £40 for him to do the cutting and the bits of welding that I needed. Took him a few days, and then here I am just chucking it back onto the car. Obviously, I do need to make some mounts for the intercooler, but we're going to do that later on. There's a few other bits to do first. But it came out really clean, and it was a much better option getting him to weld it rather than me chopping and using loads and loads of couplers all over the place and risking leaks. Okay, so now it's moving on to the boost gauge and boost controller. This was £15 and 19 pence delivered. Really, really simple. The 52mm gauge, which is pretty much all gauge pods and stuff like that you'll get a hold of, will be. Obviously, you're trying to do this on a budget to save money, so I'm going to drill a hole in this vent here using a 52mm hole saw. You can see the flap at the back of it is still working. I then had to drill a small hole in that for the line for the gauge to go through as well, and then another hole in the bottom of the unit for it to come out of, and then obviously through the dash. And then here I'm just heating up the line with a lighter, and then pushing it onto the fitting onto the gauge, just so then it will shrink onto it and create a nice tight seal. And then it really is just as simple as putting it back into the car. And luckily, next to the throttle cable, there's a really handy little grommet which isn't used, which you can then run the line through into the engine bay. So what came with the kit obviously wasn't enough to do what you need. You can see here there's probably a meter and a bit. So I just focused on plumbing it in so I'd have a boost gauge for now, and then I'll run a T-piece off of that, or I'll go off another nipple on the inlet for the boost controller itself. So I just ran it the path I wanted it, chopped it to length, and then I had some of this wiring covering that I'm putting over it, one to protect it, and two, obviously I'm building a sleeper, so I just want it to look OEM and fresh. So obviously, because the kit didn't come with it, I had to buy another 2 meters of this pipe work, and that was only just enough to achieve what I needed to do, so I couldn't get too creative with the routing. Obviously, just cut it to length. With the wastegate and with your turbo and stuff like that, I got some diagrams with mine of how to run the pipe work to make the wastegate work and all that sort of stuff, but it's pretty simple. It's all over the internet. And then once I'd done that and I'd plumbed it all in, that was literally my turbo kit finished. Now, obviously, you could argue, oh, Joe, it's not got a downpipe on it. You know, I've not done the injectors. I've not done the ECU. This is just the bare minimum you'll need to boost your B series or D series or whatever it's going to be. So I ran a D14 turbo like this before. I didn't change anything. I upped the fuel pressure a little bit and just enjoyed it. I kept the PSI quite low, about 8 PSI-ish. Obviously, I have got injectors and an ECU and all that sort of stuff, but I've not included it in this video because that's going way beyond this. I'm just showing you the basics here of what you need to do to turbo your Honda. And in the next video, I'll be covering ECU and all the little extra bits and bobs I've done, the injectors and the sensors and things like that. But for all intents and purposes, for now, this is done. The car is B18 C4 swapped, it's turbo swapped, it is ready to go. There's just a few little bits of wiring and things like that I need to do, relocating the battery and stuff like that. But for the money I've got into it, I'm super happy with the result and how it's come out, and really looking forward to getting into the all-wheel drive stuff now. So in total, I've got £422.56 into this. That's including, the little extra bits of line and stuff I had to get. So pretty damn good. 420 quid, boosted, going to make all the right noises, ready to go. And obviously after that, it depends how far you want to take it power-wise. This is basic. Obviously, I've got my ECU, and yeah, time to move on to some bigger steps this project.